So a lion was taken into captivity and thrown into a lion concentration camp, where, to his amazement, he found other lions who had been there for years. Some of them all of their lives, for they had even been born there in those particular camps. And he soon became acquainted with the social activities of all of the camp lions. They had banded themselves into groups. One group consisted of the socializers. Another was into show business. Yet another was cultural, its purpose to carefully preserve the customs, the traditions, and the history of the times when lions were free. Other groups were religious. They gathered mostly to sing songs about a future jungle where there shall be no more fences. And some groups attracted those who were artistic by nature. Others still were revolutionary, meeting to plot against their captors or against other revolutionary groups. Every so often, a revolution would break out among the lions. One particular group would be wiped out, or the guards would be killed and replaced by another set of guards. As he looked around, the newcomer observed one lion who always seemed deep in thought. He was a loner who belonged to no group and mostly kept away from everyone. There was something strange about him that commanded everyone's admiration, but also everyone's hostility. For his presence aroused self-doubt. He said to the newcomer, "Join no group. These poor fools are busy with everything except what is essential." "And what is that?" asked the newcomer. "Studying the nature of that fence." I don't know about you, but when I read that, I was deeply and profoundly moved. Did you hear that? The newcomer and the lion, so all of the different social structures within the camp, and the one lone person who was either praised or demonized, said, "Join in no group, because the only thing that is essential is to be able to look and study the nature of that fence." And so these subsets of lions, some of them sounding productive, some of them even seeming to be a part of something that was idyllic, they're losing sight of the main thing. And if you know anything about Stephen Covey, he said the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And so this morning I ask you, what is that main thing? When we join these groups, when we get sucked up in or seduced into the world of effect, we are thinking that what we are joining or what we are mobilizing against is something actually quite productive, when in point of fact it might be that what we are participating in is a fragment of or a distancing of what the main thing actually is. And so when we study the nature of the fence, what we are studying is the nature of ourselves and observing how our thoughts and our thoughts alone are what limit us and nothing else. If you go back to the declaration of principle, every single week when you say that, that one line says, "I believe that all thought is creative." All thought is creative. Not just some thought, but all thought is creative. And how I choose to think creates my personal experience. And that personal experience isn't generated or formulated by any outside effect or by any outside party or group or circumstance or family dynamic or social construct. The personal experience and the personal experience alone is a case study in the fence. And the fence is our thought and our relationship to thought. And as I began to look at this and dive deeper into this, I become hyper aware sometimes about what it is that people say to me. And of late, I began to look at this thing that I call a subtle acceptance. A subtle acceptance is something exactly what it sounds like. We have very subtly, without even realizing it, completely unconsciously, accepted certain ideologies as point of fact, without question, only because everybody else is doing it, only because all of the other subset of the lion groups look very attractive and we want to belong. And as we gravitate to these particular things, we are forgetting that as we enter into whatever these groups are, that the only thing that really matters is the way in which we think. But because of our human nature, we have this longing for, we have this longing to be validated. We want to be validated by all of the different groups. And sometimes that validation is the very thing, and the need for that validation is the very thing that begins to water down the main thing, and in letting the main thing be the main thing. What the Declaration of Principle tells us is that the way in which you and I think, the very customary way in which we formulate and have a relationship with thought, is the only thing that lends itself to the fabric, to the landscape, to the experience of not just our present, but also our future as well. And so this idea of race consciousness or group consciousness or mass thinking, sometimes, without even realizing it, brings to us what we call a subtle acceptance or a social acceptability. And so someone said to me the other day very earnestly, they said, you see, even so-and-so is struggling. And they were so happy that so-and-so was struggling. They were so happy that this person wasn't able to get a job with all of their degrees and with all of their history, that they were struggling. See, even so-and-so is struggling. As if to say that my struggle then is now justified. And that all of the rationale that I've given you as to why things don't work now has validation. Have any of you ever done that? We've looked at somebody else's downfall and think, oh my God, thank God. Thank God they are bruised and broken, because now it makes my bruises and my brokenness feel okay. And so the social acceptance comes in all kinds of forms. It has to do with our particular way in which we struggle and the way in which we deal with our addictive natures. Social acceptance and subtle acceptance is sometimes when we leave one addiction and we feel that we've mastered that addiction and we proclaim ourselves sober from that particular addiction, and then all that we're really doing is now we're consuming something else in its stead. When true sobriety is a recognition of going back to the main thing, which is our divine nature, and that we don't need to pacify pain, and we don't have to leave one thing and then just unconsciously consume something else to fill a void. And before you know it, we have joined a lion group of other people who are doing the same thing, and so we subtly accept that that's the way that it is. We listen to news, we read newspapers, we go online, and we see all kinds of things about the way in which the economy is doing this, and the market is doing this, and this kind of action from this particular group is going to affect us this way. And we subtly accept these things as true, forgetting who and what we are, and forgetting that every single week we say a declaration, we declare a declaration of principle that says that my thinking and my thinking alone is the only thing that sets into motion the quality of my being. And so it's amazing to me when we start to look at the subtle acceptance. I was thinking, God, what year was it? It was 2000, the year 2000, and I had this cough. And it was a cough that wouldn't go away. And I tried to force it and move through it. I was still working, but this cough was so persistent. And I called it my life savings cough, because I went through my life savings trying to uncover what this cough was about. If you were a shaman with a chicken claw and a crystal on it, I would go see you. Anything to find a diagnosis as to why this cough wouldn't go away. Chinese medicine, even Western medicine, no one could pinpoint it until finally I'm sitting in this Beverly Hills doctor's office, and they're doing all this scope down through, and they're pulling up tissue, and the doctor says it's inconclusive, but I think you have cancer of the esophagus. And I was like, finally! Instead of being mortified by that, I was like, I can name it. I can subtly accept the fact that by naming it, now I can move on. How many of you have ever done that? We live in this ambiguity, but if somebody says, no, this is what's wrong with you, we go, oh, thank God, now I know. Now I know what I'm up against. Now I know what I can do. Now I know what to put before me in order to be able to create solution. When all along, what? Solution has been there. And it wasn't cancer, and it wasn't any of those things. It was something else. But the point of the story was I was prolonging. I was prolonging and giving my power away to somebody else's assessment. And forgetting the fact that my thoughts, and keeping the main thing of looking at that wall and discerning that the only thing separating me from where I am and from what freedom isn't about the collaboration and the opinions of others. It's about returning to the crystalline nature of thought and realizing that my freedom is wherever I am. My wholeness is wherever I am. There's nothing more entertaining than getting together with a bunch of ministers. And all these ministers talking about the trends, and well, beware of summer when all your people leave because your money goes down, in the summertime. And everybody goes, yeah, that's true. Money goes down. And I go, that's funny. Our money doesn't go down in the summer. Our money goes down in January and September. And somebody, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, what's the difference between having a building and not having that? Well, without a building, you can't really have community. Yeah, that's true. And you start to hear all of the dialogue, and everybody's going in agreement, very subtly accepting that whatever is happening in one community has to be the valid truth of what's happening in another community. Those who are recruiting diversity. And I say, how do you go and recruit diversity? Do you go in and pull people off the street and say, I'll pay you. You have a different skin color. Here, sit. How do you cultivate a children's program? All of these things, it's like the subtle acceptance that all of these things are challenging and difficult. And what I start to realize is that there is sort of a trickle-down effect sometimes. That trickle-down effect starts at perhaps the top of that, which is the spiritual leadership. And so I take very seriously any glitch that I might have in my subtle acceptance of things being difficult. It's where one minister says, yes, we really want to grow. We really, really, really want to grow. But what they really love is the intimacy of their small community. And so they never grow. And they go, yeah, we're open to a children's program, but secretly they're telling other people over lunch how much they hate kids. And the subtle acceptance of the fact that these things are hard. So I want you to think about that phrase, subtle acceptance. Subtle acceptance. The things that you are just allowing to be your truth. That keep you within the confines of the groups of the lions who are telling you, yeah, you're right. Yeah, it is difficult to lose that weight. Yeah, it is difficult in this market to be able to find this particular kind of job. Yeah, you're right. You are too old for that. Perhaps you should reinvent yourself because who you are right now just stinks. So you need to reinvent yourself. And so we start to subtly accept all of the collection of the opinions of all of the groups that we have been in, forgetting the main thing, and letting the main thing be the main thing consistently. Consistently. There's something very subtle, perhaps even subtly dangerous, when we look at certain circumstances that are going on in our life and we're looking for other people who have had the same circumstance, because there's a polarity to that. Because that person can inspire, but they can also be our opportunity to want to carbon copy what it is that they did. And then we gauge and say, I'm not making the same improvement. I'm not doing the very things that they're doing, so I must be failing at that. When your journey is your journey, and it's a unique one. The only commonality in the journey is to let the main thing be the main thing. And that is to know that your freedom is here now. Heaven is here now. It's not something that exists or that will be presented to you once you get all of your I's dotted and your T's crossed and everything is copacetic. Heaven is here now. And so we start to look at the subtle acceptance that persists within us. The global vision for the month of March was about realizing the power of mind. And Ernest Holmes said, in the longer extended Declaration of Principle that he wrote in the 1920s, one of the statements he said was, we believe in the control of conditions through the power of this mind. We believe in the control of conditions through the power of this mind. There's nothing subtle about subtle acceptance in there. And so when you think about that, some people take issue with the idea of controlling condition, but you have to remember, what is a condition? What is a condition? What are all those earthly conditions? We call them effects. Effects. The conditions of the world are effects. They are form. Where does form come from? Not from Samantha Stevens of Bewitched tweaking her nose and then poof, it's there out of nothing. But everything, if it's true, that has its origin in mind, then where did that condition or that effect come from? From mind. Now, I will grant you that it doesn't necessarily always come from one mind, but what if you get a lot of minds, a lot of lions, thinking the same thing? That's what race thought, that's what mass consciousness is. If you get a lot of people subtly accepting these particular things, what do you breed? You breed a condition. And what did Ernest Holmes says? We believe in the control of conditions through the power of this mind. Did he say, but first you have to get permission from everybody else who's thinking that before you can control the condition? So I really want you to hear me this morning. The subtle acceptance is a subtle acceptance of a condition. That's all that it is. And what are you here to learn? That you can control the condition through the power of what? Your mind. And what is your mind? Your self-awareness. The way in which you and I choose to think. In science of mind, we believe then in the control of conditions through the power of mind and not vice versa. Conditions then do not control the mind, even though sometimes there is an appearance of this because our consciousness is ensconced in the physical body. The things that we are engaged in, the physical day-to-day conditioning experiences. We begin to believe that we are bodies instead of mind. We forget that we are a soul. And so if you wanted to change the language of that a little bit, we could change from the control of conditions to we believe in the recognition of conditions for what they are. How do you like that? We believe in the recognition of conditions for what they are, a product of mind. And because they are a product of mind, they can be changed if they do not serve us. What do you think about that? We believe in the recognition of conditions for what they are. Simply a product of mind, simply a product of a mass subtle acceptance. And because they are a product of mind, they can be changed if they do not serve us. So our job then is to, number one, understand that thoughts are not things. Thoughts produce things. There's a difference. Thoughts are not things. Thoughts produce things. Thoughts are energy that produces things. Those are the conditions. And the second thing is find within us then enough willingness and enough belief to want to change those thoughts. What if I said to you, you are subtly accepting that particular thing about yourself? Do you want to proclaim allegiance to that? Do you want to have loyalty to your lack? Do you want to linger in your lie? If you want to do those things, you have every single right to do that. But please do not kvetch about it. That was for Essie. Please do not kvetch about it. Please do not complain incessantly about the world isn't working for you. Because realize that you are the one that has the opportunity to study the fence and to decide what is going to remain the same. Hear me. You get to decide what is going to remain the same and what is going to change. You do. Not anything else out there. And sometimes what is necessary to bring us back home to a place of that remembrance is to turn everything off. Turn the television off. Turn Facebook off. Turn all of the groups of conversation off. And sit in contemplation and study the fence. And begin to remember that the disillusion of that is not predicated on what somebody else does and whether or not they give you permission. It's predicated on you keeping the main thing, solely. And the last thing that we do then is we practice. 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 So Krishnamurti said, "This is my secret. I don't mind what happens." I had to look at that. This is my secret. I don't mind what happens. And so sometimes if you're not paying attention and you read that, it feels like a personal affront to everything and everyone that says that we must mobilize. We must be a part of social justice and reform, and we must make a difference. Krishnamurti says, "This is my secret. I don't mind what happens." And then I read this Persian proverb that says, "Drops that gather one by one finally become a sea." And I realize that those two statements are not different, even though the first one by Krishnamurti sounds very passive. And the other one, the Persian proverb, has action to it. And I start to realize that both of them are the same. Because what Krishnamurti is doing, he's the lion sitting there observing the fence and allowing himself to disassociate from all of the noise that's saying, this is the way you got to do it. And returning back to the statement in the Declaration of Principle that says, I believe in the power of thought and in the control of conditions. And so one by one then, the one by one, the drop one by one that becomes a sea, isn't necessarily you and I physically taking a drop one by one and putting it into a container. It's the drop by drop of consciousness, of thought, that lets go the subtle acceptance and becomes very deliberate in terms of keeping the main thing the main thing. And so what is that main thing? What is that main thing for you? Is it love? Is it freedom? Is it wholeness? To me, they're all interwoven. Is it your joy? Is it being deeply rooted in passion and commitment and relationship? What is the main thing for you? And I want to caution you to not get so pulled in every single direction and trying to keep the main thing, that you're seeking advice from every single person. And you're joining everything. Because here's the way it works. If you want to be validated and made right, you will find people who will validate you and make you right. If you want to say, they did this to me, you can go and you can find a group called theydidthistome.com, and you will join it and you will be a gold star member, because you will find anyone to agree with you. We believe in control of conditions through the power of this mind. I just want to leave that with you this morning. And so it is. Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.